The man's voice cut through the night like a jagged blade. You don't belong here. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even loud. It was that quiet, venom-dripping kind of tone that lands heavier than any shout. The kind of tone that says, I've already decided who you are, and it's nothing good. Under the flickering neon of the Harbor Crest Hotel sign, Robert Kane froze mid-step. His hand tightened around the handle of his duffel bag, its once army green fabric now faded to the color of moss and rain. He'd heard this before, in different accents, different uniforms, different decades. But somehow, it always felt the same. The hotel parking lot smelled faintly of gasoline and wet concrete. Across the street, a diner's sign buzzed like it was trying to escape its own frame. The city was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional hiss of tires slicing through rain-slick streets. Robert looked up at the man blocking his way, a tall, clean-shaven figure in a charcoal suit, every stitch screaming authority and money. His name tag read Greg Thompson, manager. Greg's gaze swept over Robert's jacket, pausing on the frayed patches and the bronze star pinned to the chest. He didn't seem to care about the medal. In fact, his lip curled almost imperceptibly, like the sight of it was an inconvenience. This lot is for guests, Greg said, enunciating each word as if speaking to someone who didn't speak English. You're not a guest. Robert set his duffel down slowly. I was told the hotel runs a veterans program. Free stay for the night, plus parking. His voice was low, even. I serve my country. I'm just here to. Greg interrupted with a sharp laugh. Yeah, I know what you people always say. The words didn't echo, they sank. Hard. Heavy. Like they were made of lead. From the shadows near the lobby entrance, a couple in their mid-30s paused mid-conversation, their faces tightening with unease. A bellhop froze mid-step, his eyes darting between the two men. Robert inhaled slowly. He'd learned long ago that anger is like a landmine step wrong, and you both get blown apart. But tonight felt different. You might want to think about what you're saying, Robert said quietly, his eyes steady. Oh, I have, Greg replied, smirking. And I'm thinking this is private property. My property, for all practical purposes. And I don't need some washed-up soldier loitering in my lot. So you can either leave, or I'll have security escort you. Robert's jaw flexed, but he didn't move. Sir, the bellhop's voice was tentative. Mr. Thompson, maybe. Greg shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. The bellhop swallowed his words and stepped back. Then Greg stepped forward, closing the space between them. His cologne was expensive, sharp, almost suffocating. Last chance. Leave. Now. Robert's eyes didn't waver. You really don't know who you're talking to, do you? Greg's smirk widened. Doesn't matter. I know enough. But the real truth was about to matter. A lot. Because 24 hours from now, Greg Thompson would be standing in the exact same spot, with the entire hotel staff staring at him, his voice stripped of confidence, his career dangling by a thread, and the very man he'd tried to throw out watching with the quiet satisfaction of a soldier who survived worse battles and finally won one without lifting a hand. And it all started with a phone call Robert was about to make. Robert didn't look angry. That was the part that unnerved Greg more than he wanted to admit. Most people bristled, got defensive, or stormed off. But this man, he just stood there, still as stone, like he'd been through far worse than some hotel manager with a superiority complex. Robert bent down, unzipped a side pocket on his duffel, and pulled out an old cell phone. The casing was cracked, the kind of crack that came from years of being dropped in places far rougher than a hotel parking lot. His thumb moved slowly over the keypad, deliberate, measured. Greg rolled his eyes. What are you doing? Calling a cab? Great. Saves me the trouble. Robert didn't answer. He lifted the phone to his ear, waited. Then, when someone picked up on the other end, his voice softened. Yeah, it's Kane. I've run into a situation at the Harbor Crest Hotel. Yeah, that one. Can you come down here? Bring him with you. And maybe the others too. There was a pause. Then Robert said, Thanks. See you soon. He slid the phone back into his duffel and straightened up, his gaze never leaving Greg's face. Greg laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner, forced. So what now? You're gonna have your buddies show up and rough me up in my own parking lot. Is that how you people settle things? Robert's voice was almost too calm. No, that's how you think we settle things. For the first time that night, Greg's smirk faltered. Inside the lobby, whispers were starting to ripple. The bellhop, a wiry kid named Miguel, had slipped behind the front desk and was whispering to Jessica, the night clerk. Jessica's brow furrowed as she glanced toward the glass doors leading to the parking lot. "That guy out there, Kenny, is not just some homeless vet," Miguel said in a low voice. "I think I've seen him before. My uncle, he's a Marine. He had this photo in his living room of a guy his unit commander called a legend. That guy out there looks just like him." Jessica frowned. "A legend?" Miguel nodded. "Like Navy SEAL teams used to call him when they needed someone who could get things done. Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, you name it. My uncle said he saved more lives than anyone could count. If it's him, Greg just picked the wrong man to mess with." Outside, Greg shifted his weight impatiently. "Listen, Kane, or whatever your name is. I don't have time for games. You're trespassing. And when security gets here..." "You mean the one guy you have working nights?" Robert cut in. "The one who's probably asleep in his booth right now?" Greg's face reddened. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly, and his voice lowered just enough that Greg had to lean in to hear him. "Do you know what the Bronze Star means, Greg? Do you have any idea?" Greg scoffed. "Yeah, it's a little trinket they hand out to anyone who plays soldier long enough." The words landed like a sucker punch to everyone within earshot. Even Miguel, who had come to the lobby doors to watch, felt his stomach drop. Robert didn't blink. "It means I've seen things you wouldn't survive for an hour. It means I've carried friends out of fire while bullets were hitting the dirt 2 inches from my head. It means the flag you pretend to respect is something I actually bled for." Greg started to respond, but headlights swung into the lot, cutting him off. A dark SUV rolled to a stop beside Robert. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man built like a brick wall in a black leather jacket. His hair was silver, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Bobby," the man said, his face breaking into a grin. "You didn't tell me it was this place." Behind him, 2 more vehicles pulled in, a beat-up pickup truck and another SUV. From them stepped men and women in various shapes and sizes, all moving with the quiet confidence of people who didn't need to prove anything. Robert shook the silver-haired man's hand. "Didn't want to spoil the surprise, Sam." Greg stiffened. "Who the hell are you people?" Sam turned to him, smile gone. "Friends of the man you just disrespected. People who've served with him. People who know exactly what he's done for this country." Greg tried to laugh it off. "So what? You're all here to what? Intimidate me?" "No," Robert said. "We're here to give you a choice." Greg raised an eyebrow. "A choice?" Robert nodded. "You can keep running your hotel the way you've been running it, judging people by the color of their skin, turning away the very people who made it possible for you to have this place. Or you can learn what it means to show some respect." Greg smirked. "And if I don't?" Sam stepped forward, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Then we make sure everyone knows exactly what you said tonight. We know people, Greg. Reporters, veterans organizations, social media feeds that reach millions in a matter of hours. You think you can survive that kind of storm?" For the first time, Greg's confidence cracked. His eyes flickered toward the hotel, where more staff had gathered to watch. From behind the front desk, Jessica was already pulling out her phone. She'd caught enough of Greg's words on video to paint a very ugly picture. Miguel stood beside her, his jaw tight. Jessica whispered, "If he doesn't back down, this is going viral before midnight." Greg's gaze darted back to Robert. "You think you can threaten me?" Robert shook his head. "No, this isn't a threat. It's a mirror. You've shown us who you are. Now the whole world's going to see it too unless you decide to make it right." Greg crossed his arms. "And how do you expect me to do that?" Robert stepped closer, close enough that Greg could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind carved by years of sun, sand, and sleepless nights. "You start by apologizing. Right here. Right now. To me, to everyone watching, and to every veteran who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong in the country they fought for." Greg let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's not going to happen." Sam tilted his head. "Then I hope you've got a backup career plan, because in 24 hours, you won't be working here anymore." And with that, Robert pulled out his phone again. Robert's fingers hovered over the phone screen for a moment, then tapped a name from his contacts. The call rang once, twice. Then a woman's voice answered, warm but edged with authority. "Colonel Madison," Robert said evenly. "I've got a situation at the Harbor Crest Hotel. Thought you'd want to hear this firsthand." On the other end, the woman said something short and sharp. Robert angled the phone outward, speaker mode on. "Who am I speaking to?" Greg demanded. The voice cut through the damp night air. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Madison, U.S. Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. And you are? Greg's lips parted, but nothing came out. That's what I thought, Madison said. I've already received 2 messages and a video from witnesses in your parking lot. If what I'm hearing is correct, you refuse service to a decorated war veteran based solely on his race. That's not just morally bankrupt, it's legally actionable. Greg's face flushed crimson. You have no authority here. Oh, I have plenty, Madison replied calmly. And even if I didn't, public opinion will do the rest. There's a very large network of people ready to make sure this goes far beyond your little hotel. Robert ended the call without a goodbye. He didn't need to say more. Madison's words were already a blade twisting in Greg's carefully built image. Inside the lobby, Jessica was live-streaming on her personal social media. Her caption read, "Our manager just told a black veteran he doesn't belong here. The world needs to see this." The view count was climbing so fast she could barely keep up. Comments began flooding in. Is this real? Name and shame the hotel. I served with Kane. This man is a hero. Boycott Harbor Crest until that manager is gone. Miguel leaned closer to her phone. That's at least 5,000 people watching right now. Make that 8,000, Jessica said a moment later, her eyes widening. And look, someone just tagged a local news station. Outside, Greg finally snapped. Enough. You're not guests, you're trespassers. I'm calling the police. Do it, Sam said. We'll wait. Greg pulled his own phone from his pocket, but his hand shook just enough for the others to notice. He punched in the number, pacing as the line rang. Yes, I need officers dispatched to the Harbor Crest Hotel. I have, he hesitated, glancing at Robert, an individual refusing to leave private property. Sam smirked. Why don't you tell them which individual? Greg ignored him, but everyone could hear the dispatcher's muffled reply. Sir, is there a threat or disturbance? Greg hesitated again. No, not exactly. Then this is a civil matter, not an emergency, the dispatcher said. We'll note it, but officers are not currently available for non-urgent disputes. Greg's mouth tightened. Fine. He ended the call with a jab of his finger. From the pickup truck, a woman stepped forward. She had the kind of presence that made you straighten your posture without thinking. Tall, lean, hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her jacket bore the insignia of a Special Forces unit. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice steady. My name's Sergeant First Class Dana Ortiz. I've done 3 tours overseas. You don't know me, but you should know this when we come back home. We don't leave people behind. That includes Kane. That includes calling out people like you. Greg rolled his eyes, trying to reassert control. Spare me the war stories. This is a business, not a charity. Ortiz took one step closer. It's also not your personal fiefdom to decide who is and isn't worthy of basic respect. Jessica stepped outside then, phone still in hand. You might want to check your email, Greg, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Corporate just sent a message. Seems they're already aware of the situation. Greg's head whipped toward her. What? I forwarded the live stream, she said. And let's just say the VP of Operations isn't thrilled with your choice of words tonight. Greg's jaw clenched so tight the muscle in his cheek jumped. Robert remained still, watching. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful move was not to fight but to stand, steady and silent, while the other man buried himself. He finally spoke. You still have that choice, Greg. Make this right now, or watch it burn. Greg's eyes flickered between Robert, the gathering crowd, and Jessica's camera. The smirk was gone now, replaced by something smaller, more calculating. You want an apology? He said slowly. Fine. I'm sorry if my words offended you. A low murmur rippled through the veterans. Sam's voice was flat. That's not an apology. That's you covering yourself. Robert shook his head. You're not apologizing to me. You're apologizing to the principal. To every man and woman who's had to come back from war and face exactly this kind of treatment. Greg scoffed. This is ridiculous. Not half as ridiculous as you're going to look when this is on every news channel by morning, Dana Ortiz said. A pair of headlights approached, this time a police cruiser. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the scene. The taller one addressed Greg first. We got a call about a trespassing complaint? Greg straightened his jacket. Yes, that's correct. This man is refusing to leave. The shorter officer glanced at Robert and froze. His eyes went wide. Sir, are you Robert Kane? Robert nodded once. Yes, officer. The shorter officer turned to his partner, voice low but audible. This is the guy my dad served with. He saved his whole squad in Kandahar. The taller officer looked from Robert to Greg. Mr. Thompson, I suggest you resolve this peacefully. If this man has legitimate business here, he's entitled to be on the property. Greg's voice rose an octave. He doesn't. I run this hotel, and I. That's enough, the taller officer interrupted. We're not removing him. In fact, he glanced at Robert. Sir, if you'd like us to document what was said here tonight, we can start taking statements. The veterans all nodded, murmuring agreement. Greg's shoulders sagged just slightly. At that moment, Robert's phone buzzed. A text from Madison lit up the screen. Corporate just called me. They're pulling your reservation for the veterans program out of Harbor Crest and moving it to another chain. Also, they want to speak to Greg first thing in the morning. Robert slid the phone back into his pocket. Looks like your bosses are awake now, Greg. Greg swallowed hard. This is the perfect place to drive the tension into the final act where Greg's downfall becomes public, personal, and twice as painful as he expected. If you want, I can roll straight into the next 2,000 words where the tables turn completely, and Greg's own history gets exposed in a way that makes this more than just a one-night humiliation. That's where the lesson really hits home. Greg stood there, hands twitching at his sides, the weight of the parking lot's silence pressing on him. The crowd wasn't big, but every set of eyes was fixed on him: guests, staff, veterans, police officers. Robert stepped forward, closing the gap to just a few feet. His voice was calm, but the kind of calm that feels like a loaded gun resting on a table. You think this ends when we leave tonight? It doesn't. This is going to follow you, Greg. And not because of my butt, because you couldn't see past your own prejudice. Greg opened his mouth, but the tall officer held up a hand. Mr. Thompson, before you speak, you might want to know dispatch just got a call from a local news van. They're en route. It was as if someone had punched the air out of Greg's chest. You called the press? Robert shook his head. Didn't have to. The truth moves faster than any phone call. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the lot again. A van with the channel's logo pulled in, side door sliding open before the wheels had stopped. A cameraman hopped out, followed by a young reporter in a raincoat. She glanced from Robert to Greg, then to Jessica, who still had her phone streaming. We've been told there was an incident involving a veteran and the hotel's management. Who can confirm the details? Jessica stepped forward without hesitation. I can. I have the whole thing recorded. She held up her phone. From the first words out of his mouth. The reporter's eyes lit up with the kind of story scent they teach you to chase in journalism school. Can we speak to both parties on camera? Greg stiffened. Absolutely not. This is private property. Robert cut in, voice steady. No, Greg. You made it public the moment you spoke the way you did. The veterans moved slightly aside, giving the camera a clear shot of Robert and Greg facing each other. The reporter started rolling. Mr. Kane, we understand you're a decorated veteran. Can you tell us what happened tonight? Robert didn't embellish. He told it straight how he'd been invited under a veterans program, how Greg had confronted him without asking questions, how the words "you don't belong here" had cut deeper than Greg would ever understand. When the reporter turned to Greg, he tried for a neutral expression. This has been blown way out of proportion. My responsibility is to protect the hotel's guests and property. The reporter raised an eyebrow. And you determined Mr. Kane was a threat how? Greg hesitated just a second too long. Experience, he said finally. You learn to read people in this business. That's not reading people, Sam said from behind Robert. That's judging them. The reporter turned back to Robert. How does this make you feel, Mr. Kane? Robert paused, looking past the camera for a moment. I've faced people who wanted me dead for nothing more than the flag on my shoulder. But coming home and having someone look at me and decide I don't belong, just because of my skin? That's a different kind of battlefield. And it's one I'm tired of fighting alone. There was a lump in Jessica's throat, and she wasn't the only one. Greg thought it couldn't get worse. Then it did. The reporter's earpiece crackled, and she stepped aside to take the update. When she returned, her expression was sharp. We've just confirmed that the Harbor Crest corporate office has issued a statement. As of tomorrow morning, Mr. Thompson, you are suspended pending investigation for violation of the company's anti-discrimination policy. They've also announced a review of all staff training protocols. Gasps rose from the staff clustered by the lobby. Miguel looked like he'd just watched a magic trick. Greg's voice came out hoarse. You can't just. The reporter cut him off. There's more. We've also received word from a local veterans association. They're organizing a boycott of Harbor Crest until further notice. Robert didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just turned to the veterans beside him. We're done here. But as they began to walk toward their vehicles, a voice from the crowd stopped him. It was Dana Ortiz. Kane, you said he had 2 lessons to learn tonight. That was just the first. Robert's eyes flicked to Greg, then back to Dana. Right. He walked back, slow and deliberate, until he was once again just a few feet away from Greg. You think this is about losing your job? Robert asked quietly. It's not. That's just a consequence. The real lesson, the one you're going to live with, is knowing that when the moment came for you to show what kind of man you are, you failed. And every time you tell yourself it wasn't your fault, you'll hear my voice reminding you you had a choice. Greg swallowed hard, but said nothing. The police left first, then the news crew, then the veterans, one by one, until Robert was the last to leave. He paused at the edge of the lot, looking back at Greg now standing alone under the flickering neon sign. For a moment, Robert almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he turned away, duffel swinging at his side, and walked toward the SUV where Sam waited. 2 weeks later, Greg's name was still trending for all the wrong reasons. The hotel chain had cut him loose. His attempts to land another management job were met with polite rejections or, more often, silence. And every time he checked his email, there was another link, another article, another replay of that night's footage. But the worst came one afternoon when he ducked into a grocery store. A little boy tugged at his mother's hand, pointing. That's him, the boy said. That's the man who was mean to the soldier. Greg had never moved through a checkout line so fast in his life. Meanwhile, Robert was back on the road. He'd used the incident to push for stronger public awareness around discrimination against veterans of color. The footage had gone national. Donations to the veterans program had doubled. And Robert had received more messages than he could count, some from strangers, some from men and women he'd served with, all thanking him for standing his ground. One night, sitting by the motel window in a small town far from the city, Robert's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know I can't take back what I said, but I'm trying to do better. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Robert stared at it for a long moment. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because the real victory wasn't in Greg's words, it was in knowing that, for once, the lesson had landed. And that maybe, just maybe, the next time Greg saw someone who didn't belong in his eyes, he'd think twice before opening his mouth. That night, Robert zipped up his duffel, checked his medal in the side pocket, and stepped out into the cool air. Another town, another fight worth showing up for. And somewhere behind him, a man who'd once believed his authority was untouchable was learning, day by day, that the cost of prejudice is paid in more than just jobs. It's paid in the mirror you have to face every morning. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.